So we now continue with chapter 5, and now it comes to the 5 lower and 5 higher feathers. These are very much related to the practice and also to the right view for us, especially when we start to practice, to cultivate along the path conductive to liberation. And it is important to know which factors or which defilements are actually big troubles for us. And the 5 lower feathers, they are the greed to pleasure in Kamadhatu, the harmfulness, which obviously only in Kamadhatu, and view of a self, the esteeming of morality and ascetic practices, and doubt. Why they are called the lower fetters? What does it mean by lower? According to Mahavibhasha, there are 2 types of lower, or it has 2 meanings. The lower realm or the lower sentient being. The lower realm means this realm of desire. It is the lowest. And this realm cannot be crossed over, cannot be transcended due to the first 2 fetters, the greed to pleasure here and the harmfulness. While the lower sentient being, it refers to ordinary beings who are lower than the noble beings. And these lower sentient beings cannot be, this status cannot be transcended due to the last 3 fetters, due to the view of self, the esteeming of morality and ascetic practices, and doubt. And also the first 2, the greed to pleasure and harmfulness, these 2 prevent one from living, from transcending Kamadhatu, like jailers, like those jailers working in a prison. They keep an eye on you and they make sure that you do not have freedom. You are trapped here in the prison of Kamadhatu. As long as you have these 2, it's impossible for you to leave this stage, to leave this realm, and be reborn into the upper 2 realms of form or formless realms. And the other 3, the view of a self, the esteeming of morality and ascetic practices, and doubt, these 3, even if one manages to leave Kamadhatu by, for instance, cultivating the dhyana meditations, will have to be brought back to the realm of desire by these 3. As long as they have not abandoned the view of a self, esteeming the morality and ascetic practices, or doubt, even they have left Kamadhatu, they will come back. So these 3 are like patrol officers. They keep looking for people who has just left Kamadhatu, and they'll be back because of these defilements. There is a very famous story as recorded also by this records of the Mirror of the Source. It is written by a Chinese master, a very important master of China, Yongming Yanshou. Basically, it is a story about Buddha's teacher. Before Buddha attained enlightenment, he followed a few teachers from outsiders as well, and one of them is called one of them. I think the name is. I can check the names, but his teacher, this teacher taught Buddha the samapati of non-conception, of neither conception nor non-conception. That is the samapati for someone to be born in. That is the samapati with the retributive effect for someone to be reborn in bhavagra, in the highest sphere in the formless realm. So Buddha learned this samapati from his teacher, and of course later he found that it is not the right path to liberation, so he gave up and continued his own path. But the thing about his teacher is that one day he was practicing, he was cultivating this samapati, and Buddha's teacher. And that day he was annoyed, he was irritated by some fish in a lake. As the fish jumped in and jumped out of the water, and also annoyed and irritated by some birds flying over with some sounds that interrupted his cultivation on this samapati. So he was a bit annoyed, and he had a vow. So he vowed, unfortunately, that he vowed to be of an animal one day, so he could eat the fish in the water, and he could also catch the birds flying in the sky. So it was this this vow. He after he was born in bhavagra, Buddha predicted that after his life comes to an end in bhavagra, he will come back to Kamadhatu as an animal that can catch fish and also catch birds. So we really can learn something from this story, that as long as we do not abandon defilements, and as long as we're still in the three realms, without the ability to penetrate, to become a noble being, doesn't really help much. We'll come back to the desire realm anyway. Yeah, that's what the story can tell us. And Buddha said that actually one would become a stream enterer, the Shirotapana, by abandoning the last three fetters: the view of a self, esteem in morality, and ascetic practices, and doubt. Well, we do know that if one penetrates into the Noble Truths, the 16 moments, through the path of vision, then one would become a stream enterer. That requires this being to abandon all defilements, to be abandoned by the past vision. But why Buddha said that one would become a stream enterer by abandoning the three fetters here? How do we understand it? Well, Buddha, we can understand it in a few different from a few different angles. Buddha said this from the perspective of roots, and by roots I mean that view of a self is the root for view of the extremes. If you abandon view of a self, then yes, you will also abandon view of the extremes, as we have mentioned earlier. And esteeming of morality and ascetic practices is the root for esteeming of views. Therefore, if you abandon this one, esteeming of views will also be abandoned. And doubt is the root for false views. If you have abandoned doubt, then the false views will not arise either. They will also be abandoned. So, those 3 unmentioned will be abandoned if one has abandoned the 3 fetters here, which Buddha mentioned. So therefore, Buddha's teaching that one would become a stream enterer with abandonment of the 3 fetters is indeed a sufficient statement. Another way to understand this is that Vasubandhu gave another explanation. He said the last 3 fetters here are indeed the 3 main obstacles that prevent us from liberation. It's just like heading towards a remote place, just like we march towards a destination. And usually we can say that we have 3 obstacles if we want to go somewhere. The first obstacle is that we're not really willing to go. We don't have this will. We're not willing to go. And the second obstacle is that we get lost. And the third one is that we have a doubt about the route or about the path. Then we will not, with any of these 3 obstacles, we will not arrive at the destination. And likewise, we also have these 3 obstacles if one is planning to march towards liberation. The first one, he's not really willing to start the path. He's not willing to go due to view of a self. For many outsiders, especially, they are afraid of annihilation of this self. They are afraid that me, will be destroyed completely. The bodily and the mental me will be completely destroyed if one enters nirvana. So they are afraid. They don't want to cultivate this noble path because they have this view of a self. And secondly, one may get lost along this noble path due to esteeming of morality and ascetic practices. By saying that, one may go to the wrong path. And thirdly, if we have doubt about this path towards liberation, then we may not be able to continue. So therefore, by abandoning these 3, this view of a self, esteeming of morality and ascetic practice, and doubt, we will have a determination. We will we're willing to go. We're willing to take this path, and we will not get lost. We know the way, we know the truth, and we know the path. We know what to do, and we will continue. And we don't have a doubt, so we are determined. That's another way to understand the Buddha's teaching. That's what Vasubandhu commented in his treatise. So that's about the 5 lower fetters that prevent us from living the realm of desire, or will take us back, even we manage to go to the 2 upper realms. It's closely related to especially ordinary beings. Now let's take a look at the 5 higher fetters. They are greed to existence in Upadhatu, greed to existence in Arupadhatu. So why do we list these 2 kinds of greed in the 2 upper realms separately? Because they are severe. So they list separate due to severeness. Also, we have the restlessness, the pride, and ignorance that exist in the 2 upper realms. So we have 5 higher fetters together if we combine. And if we talk about the feathers for those form and formless realms separately, we have 4. For the form realm, we have the greed to existence, we have the restlessness, and we have the pride, and also the ignorance. And for the formless realm also, we have the greed to existence, the restlessness, and pride and ignorance. So 4 for each, and 5 if combined. Why do we mention this restlessness? In a very special way, for as a higher feather, according to Samgabhadra. This restlessness disturbs and hinders one to obtain samadhi, or concentration, or dhyana meditations, or samadhi in formless realm. So therefore, as it is closely related to samadhis, closely related to the cultivation of samadhis, therefore it is established as a fetter for the higher realms. And we said that having not abandoned these 5, one cannot go beyond the higher realms. Why? And because unlike the 5 lower fetters, which are mainly established for ordinary beings, these 5 higher fetters are indeed defilements to be abandoned by the paths of cultivation that only exist in the continuums of noble beings. And to be more precise, these 5 high fetters are mainly established for non-returners who have already abandoned defilements in the Kamadhatu. They will not come back to Kamadhatu anymore, but they still have these defilements to be abandoned. And before they have abandoned these 5, they cannot obtain the arhathood, so they cannot become a perfected beings. So the higher fetters, the word higher, it could also mean higher realms, and also mean the higher liberation, a higher level of noble fruit than non-returner. According to Vibhasha, why only a part of the defilements to be abandoned by the passive cultivation established as higher fetters? For 2 reasons. 1, they facilitate rebirth into the higher realms, and defilements to be abandoned by the passive vision also bring sentient beings back to Kamadhatu, as we see in the lower fetters. Therefore, they're not called higher fetters. And second reason is that they are possessed by noble beings, namely the non-returners, not ordinary beings. These defilements have to be abandoned. We're not saying that these defilements are not possessed by ordinary beings. We are talking that these defilements are to be abandoned by the passive vision, by those non-returners, so they could become perfected beings, and they only arise in the continuum of non-returners. That's what we mean here, and therefore those defilements to be abandoned by passive vision only arise in ordinary beings will not be called the higher fetters. Now let's take a look at the subsidiary defilements. We have already learned the fundamental contaminants, the 6 or 7 or 10 or 98, depending on how you categorize them. And now, so by definition, subsidiary defilements are those not belonging to fundamental contaminants, but arising after them. We can also say that these subsidiary defilements are the uniform outflows of the root of the fundamental contaminants of the 10. For instance, hatred and jealousy, they both arise following hostility, so they are the uniform outflow of hostility, and they are subsidiary defilements. How many subsidiary defilements do we have? Well, there are a few different sayings. According to Jamyang Lodawampa, according to this current treatise, Abhidhamma Kusha Bhasya by Vasubandhu, we discuss 19. And these 19 include the 10 wrappings, the 6 stains, the idleness, non-diligence, and disbelief. Well, we have already learned this idleness, non-diligence, and disbelief in Chapter 2 when it comes to different mental events, mental states, or different mental factors. So we will talk about the 10 wrappings and 6 stains very soon. And well, according to Mula Savastivada Vinaya Vastu, that is the fundamental Vinaya of Savastivada school. They claimed 24, which also include dislike, yawning, and so on. And according to Samgabhadra, in his commentary, Nyayanushala, as I quote here, how are subsidiary defilements named and how many? Well, there are many, as Buddha told the Brahmin. There are 21 mind-irritating subsidiary defilements that can be expounded further. So there are different sayings, but here we will stick to 19 as claimed by Abhidhamma Kusha. So, of course, we don't need to struggle with the numbers here. As different sutras and shastras, they just take the major ones. These 19, one thing that we should be aware is that these subsidiary defilements, they're not equal to the small defilements, as we mentioned earlier in Chapter 2. They include all the 10 small defilements, namely the 10 permeating mental factors with small defilements, plus these subsidiary defilements also include the 5 defiled permeating mental factors, 5 of them, except ignorance, and then also includes the 2 bad permeating mental factors, that is non-modesty and shamelessness, and also include the two of the indeterminate mental factors, which are sleepiness and regret. So we got 10 plus 5 plus 2 and 2, we have 19. So let's take a closer look first on the 10 wrappings. They are, according to Vabhasikas, non-modesty, shamelessness, jealousy, stinginess, regret, sleepiness, restlessness, torpor, anger, and concealment. So what does wrapping mean? We can understand it from two points, from 2 perspectives. As Samgabhadra said, wrapping can means that we are wrapped, we are trapped in this in prison of birth and death. We are wrapped in this samsara. Another meaning is that we are wrapped by bad actions. Therefore, we'll fall into the miserable, unfortunate destinies. If we take a look, on these 10 and see how they are becoming the uniform outflow of the fundamental contaminants, we can see that the non-modesty, the stinginess, and restlessness, they are the uniform outflows of greed. The jealousy and anger, they are the uniform outflow of hostility. The shamelessness, the sleepiness, the torpor, these 3 are the uniform outflow of ignorance. And then the regret is the uniform outflow of doubt. Yep. And then about concealment, we have some debates. Some say that they are the uniform outflow of greed. Some say it is a uniform outflow of ignorance. While according to Mahavibhasha, they can be uniform outflow of greed, for instance, for fame and reputation, for fortune. It can also be a uniform outflow of ignorance, for itself, as a uniform outflow of ignorance. So there are different sayings about. There are some debates about concealment, but either of greed or of ignorance. So why these 10 are established as wrappings, as commented by Master Pu Guang. Among these 10, non-modesty and shamelessness, they are always and they're only bad. The torpor and the sleepiness, these two hinder discernment. Then regret and restlessness, these two hinder concentration. Well, torpor and restlessness, they are defiled, and regret and sleepiness, they are indeterminate mental factors. And also these four, as grouped, they are also among the 5 hindrances, which we will learn in the next lecture. And then jealousy, stinginess, anger, and conceal, they are small defilements, but they cause more problems than the other 6. So they are established here as wrappings, while the other 6 are established as the 6 stains, which we'll talk about very soon. It is important also to be aware that as we know that regret can be good or bad. We've learned that earlier in chapter 2. While sleepiness can be good, bad, or non-defined. But here, since we're talking about wrappings, we're talking about subsidiary defilements. Therefore, we only refer to those defiled, not to the good one or not to the non-defined one. They are defiled. Therefore, they're included in the subsidiary defilements. And about the restlessness, it means one cannot calm down and think about think too much on too many things. A torpor is about heavy body or heavy mind, which incapable of holding or cultivating good dhammas. For instance, one failed to cultivate karma abiding due to restlessness, or fails to finish a chanting session due to torpor. That's the 10 wrappings. Now let's take a look at the 6 stains. We have stubbornness, harmfulness, hatred, craftiness, deception, and conceit. Among them, stubbornness is a uniform outflow of esteemed views. Therefore, a stubborn man, we say that he cannot bear the views of others. He cannot accept reasonable advice from others. This harmfulness is a will to beat, to curse, to force other people, to harm other beings, to harm others' body or heart. And then hatred, lasting, and cannot easily get rid of this hatred. These two, harmfulness and hatred, they are uniform outflows of hostility. And about craftiness, we also learned this before. The cunning and hypocritical, the bended and twisted mind, to plead someone or to confuse someone and so on. It is the uniform outflow of erroneous views, and deception and conceit. We know what they mean. So deception and conceit, they are uniform outflows of greed. We might also want to compare these 4 defilements: hostility, hatred, anger, and harmfulness. As we see that hostility is one of the fundamental contaminant, and hatred and harmfulness are established here as stains, while anger is included in the 10 wrappings. So they do have some differences that we would like you to differentiate, to keep in mind. We can tell the difference from their meaning, from their mental strength, from their manifestation, and also from whether it has a subjective intention to hurt other beings. From meaning, we know that hostility it means dislike and hostile. It is a fundamental defilement, and anger is something that is a kind of range that with a sudden outbursting, and hatred is not letting go that kind of mood, and it's lasting. It's not just a sudden mood, it will last. And harmfulness, it has a focus, it has it's wanting to cause harm to other people, to other beings. And from the perspective of mental strength, we would say that hostility could be weak or medium or strong, and it could last shortly, or it can also last for a long time. While anger, usually they are strong but short, and hatred would last for a while, and harmfulness could be very strong, because they want to hear it. With harmfulness, one wants to hurt other people, so definitely it's a very strong mental strength. And the manifestation, we say that hostility can be manifested, can also hide, can also be hidden. Well, anger is very apparent. You can see if someone is angry. Hatred can also be hidden. It's not easy to always tell that someone has this hatred or this harmfulness. They are thoughts or actions that are dangerous actually to other people. And about whether it has a subjective intention to hurt, well, it is not clear on hostility. And for anger, since they're not lasting or purposely, so not necessarily that anger has a subjective, has this intention to hurt other people. And hatred, well, potentially inclined to. And harmfulness, yes, apparent, very clear intention to hurt other beings. So these are the differences among these four. Okay, so for now we have explained these subsidiary defilements also, and that's all for this lecture. We have some exercises here. In our next lecture, we will talk about the 5 hindrances and how we abandon these defilements during our during our cultivation of the past, and what can we get as a result. So what kind of fruits will we get by with abandonment of defilements. So that's we will discuss in next lecture.